Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Today we're going to be looking at the four Horsemen in Marvel Strike Force. We're going to be looking at their various events, the Horsemen themselves, along with their teams, and of course what game modes they are the most useful in. Each of the four Horsemen has of course an aspect they are associated with, a team they are associated with, and their preferred game mode. Of note, many of them work outside their preferred game mode, and the aspects are mostly just for determining which event the Horseman is unlocked by and which orbs they use. And the rotating events that you use to unlock the Horsemen and get shards for them are referred to as a scourge. Then you have modifiers in the events that are somehow also referred to as a scourge. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to refer to the event as the scourge, and the modifiers we will simply refer to as modifiers. Now, one big point of confusion for the scourges is only the highest score in a single run counts, so doing the same run multiple times doesn't really make a difference. If you were to set it to difficulty 10, apply all the modifiers, and run it completely, you would essentially be done for the event, regardless of how long it was going on. Additionally, you can simply take your time and take as long as you need for a run. There's no time limit other than the actual event timer itself, and even take as much time as you want for a node, there's no time limit within the nodes. Also, it's important to note that you can exit and refight a node anytime you want. When you exit a node, it will simply reset both your teams and the enemy teams to what they were before you attempted it. So if you felt you had some bad RNG or poor target priority, you can simply exit and then try again, adjusting that. The difficulty 5 or higher nodes are the only ones that require specific teams. If you're doing difficulty 4 or later, it may require types of characters, but it won't be as strict. If you want to unlock the Horseman in one go, you will get enough shards from the event rewards themselves after a score of 500,000. Any additional score you're earning would simply be to try and get ranking rewards. And as one final thing before we get into some individual teams that you should use for the Scourges, it's important to remember that the ranking rewards do apply. You will get shards no matter how well or poorly you do in the event, and this can push you over the top even if you can't complete difficulty 5. Additionally, you will get some red stars for the characters. However, if you want to promote them further above what you get for the ranking reward, you will need to use dark promotion credits. For the Pestilence Scourge, you can use either Dark Hunters or Web Warriors when you get to the rank 5 or higher difficulties. Dark Hunters are a good war attack team, but not amazing, and Morbius himself is not currently farmable. I guess the designers didn't want us morbing all over each other, and I think I sympathize. The Web Warriors are actually a pretty good bio-raid team. They're one of the better ones in the game right now, so they have more applications outside of the events, although the Dark Hunters are more effective in the event. For the Famine event, you can use A-Force, Young Avengers, or Inhumans. Now, A-Force is currently a 4-person team, so you will have to find a substitute if you're going to use them. I would recommend either Yo-Yo or Ms. Marvel. All of these characters are currently farmable. A-Force and Young Avengers are both relatively good war teams, however the proliferation of exceptionally good war offense teams has rendered both of them as kind of secondary, and they don't have a lot of other uses. Inhumans are not very good at this point in the game and haven't been updated in a while, so I definitely wouldn't advise it. If you're looking for raw effectiveness, Young Avengers are generally the better team for running the event. For the War event, you have Heroes, Guardians, Wave 1 Avengers, and Ravagers as your options. Now, Heroes Guardians are relatively recent, so currently Mighty Thor and Valkyrie are not farmable. The other two teams are completely farmable. Hero as Guardians are an okay war defense team, not the best, but they are currently the best team for running the events. Wave 1 Avengers, on the other hand, have a bunch of components of other teams, so you won't necessarily be building a singular good team if you build those. Ravagers do have one kind of meta application in that Archangel's event does have a pair of nodes that requires you to use specifically minions, and Ravagers do have some of the stronger minions because they are some of the few that have been updated recently. So if you want to double dip, you could go with Ravagers and try to use them for 2 Horseman teams. However, they are not the strongest team right now. And lastly for Death, we have the Bionic Avengers and Wakandans that can be used for this Scourge. However, it is notable that some of these teams were recently released, and thus Deathlock and Viv Vision are not farmable anywhere, and neither are Black Panther 1 million BC or Nakia. You can still use the original Wakandan team, and that is fully farmable, and it is a 5-person team. However, it's not the strongest out of the available options. The best team to run the event is easily the War Dogs. However, the team with the most applications outside of the event are the Bionic Avengers, who are currently the best tech raid team. And lastly, before we go into the Horsemen themselves, we'll talk about the epic campaigns. Each Horseman has an epic campaign. It's located in the same parts of the game as the Dark Dimension. Now, instead of using the normal naming structure of easy, medium, and hard, we have hard, heroic, and apocalyptic, which is basically the same thing as easy, medium, and hard. The normal difficulty reward, or the hard rewards, only gives you various ability materials. It's useful, but nothing spectacular. The heroic rewards is where you start getting the useful stuff, and that you get the awakened abilities. Awakened abilities allow you to specifically synergize the Horsemen with each other and with Apocalypse. And then the apocalyptic difficulty gives you their cool costume, and it also gives you tier 2 level 5 ions, which is pretty unique as it's one of the few places in the game you can get it. As a small note about the epic campaigns, Morgan Le Fay had the first epic campaign released, and it is significantly harder than the rest. Notably, we have on the screen a comparison of basically two of the same nodes on heroic difficulty, and you'll notice in Wars, none of the characters exceed a 200,000 CR, whereas Morgan Le Fay has multiple 300,000s and almost everybody's above 200,000. So if you just get up to gear tier 15 and you expect to be able to run Morgan Le Fays, you are probably going to be in for some disappointment. Our first Horseman today is obviously going to be the first Horseman ever released, Morgan Le Fay, aka Pestilence. Morgan Le Fay's kit revolves around manipulating the speed bar of herself and her comrades, and she also has an ultimate ability that allows her to disrupt, ability block, and damage individuals, and also traumatize enemy controllers. This is very useful for shutting down some of the enemy's more powerful characters. Overall, Le Fay ends up being a very versatile character that can be used freely in a lot of game modes, even outside of her parent team. As for Le Fay's team Darkhold, Agatha Harkness is a critical support piece. She will stealth and give everybody defense up if they drop below half health. She gives everybody drain, she manipulates a lot of the enemy with negative status effects, and overall is just a very important part of the team. Doctor Strange Heartless is going to be your primary DPS. He will give himself offense up every time an enemy dies. Additionally, he has one of the more powerful ultimates in the team in terms of dealing damage, and is going to be basically your only major source of damage. Wong is a very powerful defensive piece that can give himself taunt and defense up, in addition to safeguards so that neither of those two can be removed. He will also attack anybody who attacks any members of Darkhold, making him a very significant obstacle that your opponent will have to get through. Scarlet Witch, on the other hand, is just kind of happy to be here. She's not the most useless character in the game, however, Darkhold doesn't have a lot of abilities that require a specific number of other Darkhold characters in order to work, as they mostly just have abilities that benefit each other. In this respect, Scarlet Witch can be subbed out pretty easily, and you will often see characters like Dormammu put in her place. One of the problems with Darkhold, however, is simply building the team. While Scarlet Witch is very farmable, she's also one of the least useful. Wong is in a campaign node and is also pretty farmable if you can get to that campaign node. However, Strange Heartless and Agatha Harkness are not currently farmable in any capacity, so whether or not you are able to build a full Darkhold team will have an element of randomness at this point in the game. Darkhold's primary use is in the arena game mode, where you will still consistently see them at the higher ends of the ladder to this day. However, Darkhold is a fairly versatile and powerful team. They were one of the best teams in War when they were first released, and they are still a very strong team in War and can be a noticeable obstacle for your enemy to try and get through. Additionally, they do have some applications in other game modes like Cosmic Crucible, although they're not necessarily the strongest team, as the Cosmic Crucible usually isn't geared towards making them work. In raids, the team can technically work, although it's not ideal. Realistically, though, Le Fay is a very useful addition to a Mystic raid team if you are doing Doom raids. Overall, Darkhold is probably one of the strongest and most versatile out of all the Horseman team, and it sets the bar perhaps a little too high. Morgan Le Fay is currently my most used character, as I use her on basically every team the game will let me. Our next Horseman for today will be Rogue, aka Famine. Rogue's kit is very easy to describe because it basically all revolves around a single ability, and that's her special attack. Her special attack basically cannot miss and will inflict a large pile of negative status effects, including things like disruption, offense down, defense down, ability block, trauma, so that none of those status effects can be removed, etc. Additionally, it will drain their speed bar and do some damage to them. And lastly, it will also apply a bunch of positive status effects to Rogue herself, including taunt, evade, defense up, immunity, safeguard, etc. This is the biggest part of not just Rogue, but also the Unlimited X-Men as a team, because the entire principle behind this team is that Rogue completely cripples an enemy character and then becomes an immovable wall for your team. And this kind of immediate effect on board also gives Rogue some applications outside of the team and even outside of their chosen game mode. The Team Unlimited X-Men is largely built around Rogue just using her special ability to cripple an enemy. At the end of each enemy activation, Gambit will flick a playing card at one of them, and this will essentially result in one of the enemy just casually being nickel and dime to death while the enemy struggles to get through Rogue. The rest of the team is unremarkable at best. Sunfire is a damage dealer. He's a pretty decent one, but nothing you haven't seen before. Dazzler can remove some status effects from your team, which is good, but not anything crazy. And really, Phantom X is mostly just a backup for in case Rogue doesn't work, but if Rogue doesn't work, often Phantom X isn't enough to save you. What this largely means is that Unlimited X-Men as a team is mostly a two-person team of Rogue and Gambit with 3 optional characters that you can mix and match as you need. Fortunately, however, even though it is a 2-man team, both of those characters are farmable. Rogue is farmable in the event, and Gambit is currently in the Crucible store. Dazzler even shows up in the Raid store, which means the only characters you're currently missing are Phantom X and Sunfire. The only game mode where Unlimited as a team truly excel in is the Cosmic Crucible game mode, where they get a pretty significant amount of bonuses and are generally the best team in that game mode right now, although there are a few other good contenders. Rogue herself has some applications outside of Cosmic Crucible, again as her ability to immediately cripple an enemy is often useful. But the team in other game modes such as War, they're just an okay team or a pretty good team. They can take on average enemies, but will struggle against anything that's really powerful. For our next Horseman, we have Red Hulk, aka War. Now, Red Hulk's gimmick is fairly straightforward to explain in that every time he is attacked, he will gain a charge. Once he gets 5 charges, he will both get a bunch of speed and get a bunch of ability energy, which will allow him to use his ultimate. His ultimate normally requires so much ability energy that he can't actually use it, but once he gets enough ability energy from getting 5 charges, he will be able to pop it right away. It flips all positive status effects to negative status effects, applies heal block, applies trauma, and also inflicts the gamma radiation status effect where the enemy will just gain large stacks of bleed in every turn. Additionally, Red Hulk himself gets very significant bonuses for having 5 charges on himself. So the entire goal of a Red Hulk team is just to get Red Hulk to 5 charges. However, the enemy has to attack him personally, and he doesn't have something like a taunt to force the enemy to attack him. Red Hulk's team is the Gamma team with Hulk, She-Hulk, Abomination, and Brawn. Now, Hulk is actually one of the more problematic members of this team because every time a member of Gamma is attacked, he will gain speed, and he also has a taunt and gets a significant amount of resist while he's taunting, so it's very hard to remove it. Additionally, you have She-Hulk, who every time a member of Gamma is attacked, she will gain a charge. Once she gets 5 charges, she will take all negative status effects from Gamma, put them on an enemy, and attack that enemy. This effectively means that you have a clock on Hulk, who is going to gradually get charges and then taunt, who gradually increases speed bar and then taunt, Red Hulk, who will gradually get charges and then use his ultimate, and She-Hulk, who will gradually get charges, clear negative status effects, and hit you. This combination of clocks on the team can actually make them kind of annoying to deal with and makes it difficult to prescribe a specific member of the team to try and take out first. Interestingly, despite Gamma being a relatively new team, Gamma is actually the most farmable Horseman team right now. Hulk you get passively for playing, he's in the achievements. She-Hulk is actually in the Arena store, or the Blitz store, which is actually one of the easiest stores to get shards from consistently. And then Abomination was actually added to the Crucible store, so the only one you kind of need some randomness to access is currently Brawn. This means it's probably one of the easiest teams for new players to get access to. Obviously, the best game mode for Red Hulk is Avengers Tower. No, wait, sorry, I read that wrong. The best game mode is War. So in War game mode, the big gimmick is that Hulk starts with Taunt, and Red Hulk will gain a charge whenever anybody in Gamma is attacked, not just him. And of course, that allows for much higher consistency and him getting his ultimate off a lot faster. In other game modes, they're a lot less useful. In Cosmic Crucible, they're a decent attack team, they're not amazing. In Raids, they can overpower some of the weaker raids, but will struggle with the higher end of Doom. In Arena, if you're a lot lower on the ladder, they may be useful, but if you're higher on the ladder, they're not going to perform very well. And Red Hulk himself doesn't perform that well outside of the team, just because of how slow and inconsistent he can be with having to be attacked to get his charges. and our last horseman today is going to be Archangel, aka Death. Archangel's gimmick is that whenever an enemy dies, he will attack the lowest health non-summoned enemy. He will also give an ability energy to all Death Seed, and he will reduce the enemy's speed bar and reduce it significantly more in raids. He also has an ultimate that does a good bit of damage, but it's not the most in the game. He has an AoE attack that will clear negative status effects, and personally is just probably the weakest of the 4 horsemen in terms of his own stats. Death Seed is a fairly interesting team because we have Nemesis, who heals everybody by draining health from the enemy and also applies a lot of negative status effects. We have Beast, who can revive characters. In raids he can also clone an enemy, and he also assists with every attack, which also means you can use the Skirmisher plus Striker combo with the team to gain additional attacks. Additionally, we have Magneto. Magneto can use his ultimate to blind everybody, and if he has a full Death Seed team, will gain a lot of speed, and in raids will gain full ability energy basically every raid node. He also has an ability block that's always available on demand, which is useful if you have raid nodes that have Doom. And then we have Psylocke, who's just kind of happy to be here. She doesn't really have the best role in the team. She's a little more useful than Scarlet Witch though, just because a lot of the Death Seed abilities want you to have as many Death Seed as possible, unlike Darkhold that mostly doesn't care. Of course, this is the most recent team, so it's also the least farmable of the teams, with both Dark Beast and Nemesis not showing any signs of farmability anytime soon. Magneto is a legendary, however he's probably one of the easier legendaries to access since you can get him with both Mutant and Brotherhood, or not Mutant, but X-Men and Brotherhood, which are very common tags with around 20 characters that have one of those too. Psylocke is of course completely farmable, and she has the X-Men tag, so she can get you Magneto, which means her only real role in life is to just be a placeholder that has the right tags, but hey. The primary application for Death Seed is just going into the mutant raid nodes in Doom. They are one of the few teams that can really clear it very easily. Astonishing X-Men can kind of do it, but with some difficulty, and they have to be a much higher character rating in order to do it. So overall, Death Seed is probably a pretty big boon to like higher tier players who are looking for that. Outside of Death Seed, they can take out some enemies in War. They're not the worst. They're not very good in Arena. In Cosmic Crucible, they're very okay. Overall, they really are almost exclusively a war team, and Death himself and Archangel himself doesn't have a lot of applications as an individual character just because he's not as much of a personal powerhouse as some of the other horsemen can be. As far as rating the teams, it's actually kind of difficult to rate them because each of them specializes in their own game mode. Gamma, I think it's a special rating just because it's probably the easiest to both farm characters to unlock Red Hulk himself and then to farm the team, thus making it probably a more appealing choice for newer players, and it's still reasonably versatile until you start getting to the highest levels of play. Darkhold is probably the single most versatile, but it's also one of the more difficult to farm. Then you have Death Seed, who can be critical, especially if you're running the higher level Doom raids, because a good mutant raid team, especially one that you don't have to constantly babysit, is very valuable. However, Unlimited X-Men is almost unquestionably the weakest, as Cosmic Crucible is not a priority game mode for most players. However, if we were just to rate the Horsemen, I would probably put Morgan Le Fay on top. She is currently my most used character. She's in my Arena team, she's in my Mystic Raid team. I use Darkhold all the time in Cosmic Crucible and in War, and of course I also use her in Dark Dimension. She's overall just a very versatile character, and it's hard to find scenarios where she's ever bad. Second, I would probably put Rogue, just because Rogue has such a strong immediate impact on board, and a lot of game modes do have a faster pacing, where that is inherently more useful than somebody like Red Hulk. Although Red Hulk is a close second, any of the grindier game modes such as Raids or Dark Dimension, Red Hulk can sometimes beat out Rogue just because once he gets going, he's very hard to stop. Obviously, the weakest of the Horsemen is unquestionably Archangel. He just doesn't do enough on his own, and the only time you would ever really sub him in is if you know you're going to be fighting weak enemies, or maybe if you're in a mutant raid node and you don't have full Death Seed, because he does kind of combo with Astonishing X-Men, but overall he's probably the lowest priority as far as individual characters. And that's our video for the day. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, hope you had fun. Like, comment, and subscribe if you did, and feel free to let me know in the comments down below which Horseman and which team is your favorite, because I honestly really like Rogue. I think she's just a joy to play. Have a nice day, everybody.